Well, Francois, welcome to Lesson 57. We have an audience member,
Hello.
your beloved mother. But that's not part of Lesson 57. Lesson 57 is the last lesson of Chapter 8, the quadrilaterals. You recall Chapter 7 was triangles, three-sided figures. Now we've been looking the last week or so at quadrilaterals. And Lesson 57 is aptly called the big picture. Okay. They get a couple of quick theorems out of the way, sort of leftovers, and then they present some very useful facts that sort of give you a general overview, I guess, and make some useful points that'll come in handy and that offer, I think, an interesting principle for your work later. So first, the two quick theorems. I'm going to let you look at the proofs. I'm getting tired and fading. I didn't read the proofs very carefully, but I scanned them and they look pretty simple. Okay, but basically with a rectangle, the diagonals of a rectangle are congruent. Okay, so these dotted lines, they are congruent. And I think you're creating two triangles, okay, DAB and ADC, and you end up proving that they are the same, and therefore by the reflexive property, these two diagonals which form the hypotenuse of the two triangles will be the same. They will be congruent. Okay, so it's not rocket science. The second one has to do with the diagonals of a rhombus, and the diagonals of a rhombus bisect each other. Is the idea here. Excuse me. And so the diagonals of a rhombus are perpendicular to each other. Sorry, not that they bisect each other, but I'm sure they do bisect each other, but that they're perpendicular. Okay. So again, you're looking at triangular shapes, and you demonstrate that angles 1 and angle 2 are right angled. So that's all done here. Okay. Now the putting all together part is interesting because over the last two chapters you've been looking at different shapes. You started in the first lesson, not chapter but lesson rather, with any four-sided shape, and some things were said about that. Then you were told about trapezoids, quadrilaterals where one pair of sides is parallel. Then you looked at parallelograms, where both sides are parallel. And there were different properties and theorems that were associated with each. There was the special case of the trapezoid, the isosceles trapezoid, where both opposite sides, the opposite sides that are not parallel, are congruent. They were called congruent legs. And on the parallelogram side, there were two special cases again, the rectangle and the rhombus, where in the case of the rhombus, there are four congruent sides and everything's parallel, but not square angled. And there were square angles, but where the four sides were not congruent. That's the case of a rectangle. Finally, you have the square, which is again a special case, which combines all the attributes of the rectangle and the rhombus. Four right angles, four congruent sides, and what's the other thing? Parallelism for the opposite sides. So the interesting point here, not only is this a useful summary of everything you've learned in Chapter 8, but they make the interesting point that there's a kind of a hierarchy of proofs and theorems. Anything that applies to this figure, to a regular parallelogram, can also be used when you're doing proofs for anything below it. Anything that can be said that's true for a rectangle applies to a square. Anything that can be said that's true to a rhombus applies to a square as well, and so on. Same thing over here. So that's useful. The way they phrase it is, let me just have a look here. Every figure has all the characteristics or properties of the ones above it, plus all of its own unique properties. So for example, a rectangle has all the properties of a parallelogram and of a plane quadrilateral. Okay, it has opposite sides parallel, it has four sides like any quadrilateral, etc., etc. Okay, and that's it. So fairly light stuff, nothing too difficult. And then I think you're looking at some review, okay, in your exercises. Nothing overly challenging. Be aware that you have a test to do as well, and Mom says she's put this on your schedule, okay? And the test Does he do his test tomorrow on, or another day?
Probably be another day.
Another day.
I can't remember what the schedule is.
'Kay.
But if there's a test to be taken in the day, then there must be a lesson on a Saturday. So be aware that on Saturday, you have to do a lesson.
There you have it. The breaking news.
Boom, bada boom, bada boom.
Bonne chance, Focus. À
Then
bientôt. On t'aime. Bye.